Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I am Ross Morasso here with my guest today, Nadine Zainoun. She is an executive leadership coach, and one of her focuses is on emotional intelligence, also things like conversational intelligence, something I hope I have at least a little bit of. So, Nadine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ross. Thanks for having me again.
Now, everyone can find you at NadineZainoun.com if you'd like to engage her and have an initial conversation to see how she might be able to help you. And that is, Nadine is Nadine, but then Zeinoun. You know, I find, Nadine, the conversation and the topic of emotional intelligence to be quite a fascinating one. And I wonder at times if this isn't just the root of all of our problems with humanity. So first question, if I can we be emotionally intelligent, yet still callous and ambivalent about having the ability? You know what I mean?
What do you mean by callous and ambivalent about
Sure. So it seems
not
like
knowing?
A lot of confusion and disconnects that we all have as human beings is out of ignorance and sort of a failure to connect, empathize, and understand where the other person is coming from.
Yeah.
Now, emotional intelligence is a tool, I would assume, that can help bridge that gap. But I wonder, as human beings, do you ever find people who are very emotionally intelligent, but choose not to care and use it as a tool to actually assist and aid and abet themselves in becoming a good leader?
Wow. Usually people who are and have it as a talent, they do it unconsciously. So they don't really think about what they're doing, but it's something built in and it's something they have developed over the years. So I haven't seen anyone who is emotionally intelligent and is trying not to use it. I mean, except if it's in certain situations where they don't want to be empathetic, let's say. Maybe a certain situation that calls for an important business decision, or, there are deadlines. People have missed deadlines many times. Maybe there's a limit where, okay, now it's not the time anymore to use your empathy. It's time to be more directive, more firm, because there are results to be achieved. So then a person would shift from his normal way of being empathetic into becoming more directive and more firm. Maybe that's a situation where somebody would not want to use the empathy that he has or she has.
Do you find that empathy is sort of the main byproduct of the emotionally intelligence of us?
Yes, it is. Empathy is a super important skill in emotional intelligence. As I said before, emotional intelligence, it encompasses many, many skills, almost 15 skills. But empathy is one of the major skills that a person needs to have if they want to be emotionally intelligent. And why? It's because empathy, if we want to define it, it's basically putting yourself in other people's shoes. So it's the process of really understanding and connecting with other people's emotions and what they're going through and how they are experiencing a certain situation or experience. So it's key to us connecting with the emotions of others. And it is key for building relationships, because if I can't connect with how you feel about something or what you're trying to say and how you see it in your eyes, I can't bridge the gap between me and you. There will always be a gap. So that's why it's really critical to be empathetic or to have empathy as a leader.
I ask because I think sometimes if we feel as though that we are being wronged, sometimes a way to be able to reconcile that is at least say, oh, that person, they don't know any better. Right. And so why I'm asking you about sort of a callousness while also having emotional intelligence, or I would say that if you did and then chose to not be empathetic or everything, you do know better. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. So you can't say that. So that now is your boss or anyone else you're dealing with in the world would be, just callous and trying to do what they want to do. And so that was why I was leading off with that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You would mention 15 traits.
Yes.
So what are a few of the big ones?
So I think the major ones would be, first of all, emotional self-awareness, which we talked a lot about in the previous episode. So if somebody would like to go back to the previous episode, then so that's emotional self-awareness is key, because it's key for, you know, becoming or developing your emotional intelligence. You need to first start by understanding yourself. So emotional self-awareness is key. Another thing is empathy, so because it's the key for relationships. So building relationships with others, connecting with others, you need empathy. A third one in terms of decision making is impulse control. So
Mm.
impulse control is very important to control those, you know, have self-regulation, control those impulses to react fast and maybe go with the wrong decision, or maybe, you know, do a reaction that's very emotional and it will cost you a lot later on. So impulse control is another major one. And I would say the fourth one, which is also major, is the part where you control your stress and know how to manage your stress, because stress is very related to emotions, and how you manage your stress is key for your success as a leader.
What would you say are a couple of the biggest strategies that you would give your executive clients
Mhm.
in terms of trying to manage stress? Because, you know, to me, it's like, go away. You know, that's certainly one way to help manage my stress,
Yeah.
right? But you can't always do that in the middle of the day now, can we?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So coping with stress is key, you know, as we said, because if, let's imagine when a leader cannot really cope with his stress or her stress, so they would be like when they are, let's say, overwhelmed, or really feeling like frustrated with a certain thing. If they are people who are, you know, it's easy for them to show their emotions, then this will cascade to all the team. So the whole team will become overwhelmed, frustrated, and they won't understand why, because, you know, we have mirror neurons, so we can mimic each other's, we can grasp each other's emotions. So imagine how the team would be like if I always, you know, shove that stress or that frustration on the whole team. So that's why coping with your stress and being able to understand it is key. Now, what are, you know, some typical ways of doing it? Now, some ways are, you know, choosing a certain coping mechanism. For example, maybe letting it out in a different way, like, for example, exercising or listening to music. So these, we call them coping strategies. So when you have a lot of coping strategies around you, and the leader is, you know, he's aware or she's aware that, okay, when I am stressed, I'm going to need to do these things, because if I don't, it's going to lead to me behaving in not a very good socially acceptable way with my team. So then they would resort to these coping strategies, which is a good way. Okay. And it helps them to a certain extent. And I say certain extent because it's not enough to just do that. It's important for you to understand what is really bringing me the stress. So we go back to the emotional self-awareness. It's very important that the emotional self-awareness and the coping strategies go hand in hand. So they walk together, so that I'm aware what is making me stressed. And maybe sometimes I intentionally decide that, you know what, I'm not going to do anything because there's nothing to be done. I'm just going to go work out to relieve, you know, the hormones, the stress hormones that I have. But if there is another way of better managing the stress, it's important that I go face that problem and I really manage it, not just let go and pretend that it's not happening and just go meditate or do some yoga or listen to music or whatever. I don't know if it was clear what I really meant by that. Was it clear,
Oh,
Ross?
it is. And I have a follow-up here. So do you find
Hmm.
that, and I know that there's no one right way to be a very effective leader, right? Because there's
Hmm.
so many different
Sure,
dynamics,
sure.
but something that I've found to be effective in my life is to explain to people on my teams the why behind everything that's going on. And I notice often that, you know, bosses seem to omit that part. Hey, this is what we're up to. This is what we're, you know, this is what we're doing. But why are we doing that?
Yeah.
And especially in stressful situations when, you know, it comes down from on high, right? Not every leader is the CEO either. So, in terms of managing stress, and here's why I bring this up. If you watch like old war movies, you know, it's always about the captain knows best and the alpha male, blah, 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 blah. But, in the real world, is bringing the team in on the joke, as it were, or like really giving them a frame of reference of why we're doing said mission, does that help, or does that just allow too many hands to go up in the air and then you just create too much of a democracy when you don't need it?
That's a great question. And most of the times, and I say most of the times, this is the way to go. And this is what we call emotional expression. So what leaders, I don't want to generalize and stereotype, but usually leaders are very, they're very, if you want, comfortable being assertive, because there are two types of, in emotional intelligence, there are two types of expression. There's assertiveness and emotional expression. So usually leaders are very good, as you said, giving direction, telling people what to do. This is a problem. This is what we're going to do. You do this, you do that, you do whatever. So this is what we call assertiveness, okay? And usually leaders are comfortable being assertive. But what they're not comfortable with is expressing those emotions behind these directions. Why am I saying this? What is making me, feel like this is the best way to go? What is worrying me? What is stressing me? What is it that's making me anxious? What is it that's exciting me? All of these, when the leader is able to get these out and express them, which is the emotional expression, then the team, he allows the team to empathize better with him or her. So the team now is at the same emotional wavelength as the leader. And when they are at the same emotional wavelength, they tend to be more engaged, more committed, and better inspired by this leader. So this is a very important thing to say. Now, where does it not work? It doesn't work in emergency situations. Like, for example, let's say there's a fire. You're not going to come and say, I'm worried. Do you think the fire is going to come hit us from here or from there? There's no reason to be, diplomatic and democratic, and that there you need to be directive. So there's an emergency, there's a deadline, there's something that needs to be done very urgently. It's then when the leader, it's okay to be directive and assertive and forget about the emotional intelligence in that moment. However, when a leader most of the time is emotionally expressive as well as assertive, they create the bond with the team. So there's trust there. There's a good relationship. So when you become directive with me, I'm going to accept it. Why? Because there's a relationship there, because I know who you are and I know that you care. And I trust that if you're telling me to do something, it's in the best interest of myself, the team, and the company. So do you see what I mean? So it depends, but emotional expression is very important to have in a leader.
I'm thinking of, I'll say great leaders, but that might be giving somebody undue credit. I look at big companies and those who have created big successes like Jeff Bezos, right? In Amazon. I mean, he's now got a spaceship company, for crying out loud. Somebody like him, and he certainly has taken his shots in the media of being vilified for what they've done. If you had to guess, would you say a creation of something like Amazon could have been done if Jeff Bezos was, an emotional nincompoop? I mean, if you had to guess, would you say that he has high emotional intelligence?
That's a good question. Usually, if you want to know whether, because if somebody is not emotionally intelligent, it doesn't mean they're not going to get results. Okay?
Right.
They might get results and they might be able to grow the company to where they are. I think the better indication of emotional intelligence is looking at the people and looking at the team and looking at the culture that a certain leader has created. So if you look at the culture and you find that the culture is people are engaged, they're happy, they work together, they're motivated, they're inspired, they want to give their best, and they feel heard and cared for, then I would say the leader would be emotionally intelligent. But it's not the only factor that they succeeded or not. You need to look at the team and see what the team says, and then you will get a better idea about the emotional intelligence level of the leader. But usually, let's say a leader can get this much from a team and they're not emotionally intelligent. If they work on their emotional intelligence, they can get this much out of the team, and in a much healthier way, in a way where people will not leave. They will not, feel like they're not happy in what they're doing and look for new jobs, they would really be giving their best. So of course you can get much more out of them when you are more emotionally intelligent and you know how to engage the people and get them to be committed.
You referenced something there in your answer, and this came up in a conversation that I was having last week with somebody else about the importance of caring about your team. And I mean, we all have. I mean, I've certainly been in organizations where I would come and go and I wouldn't even hear a word from my boss, sometimes for days on end. And I mean, I didn't find it soul crushing, but I mean, it certainly did mean, as me as a human being, I noticed myself now getting pushed back into, well, what can I still get out of this? And it turned it into a sort of a me thing, right? And but that was just my personal experience with it. How critical is it for leaders to schedule that time and make it a priority to check in with their team on an individual basis and care
Yeah.
about what's going on with them?
Yeah, it's very important. It's very, very important. I mean, I know that this is a challenge for leaders because if we want to be realistic, a leader has so many things to do and so many things on his schedule. So many times the main reason this slips from a leader is because of lack of time. However, because it's so important, and it doesn't mean that you have to give like, 2, 3 hours for every employee every week. It doesn't necessarily mean that. But if you're able to give them at least once a month, just 1 hour, but give them your full attention. So it's not the quantity as much as it's the quality. So listen to them, hear them out, don't judge them. Put every distraction aside. So don't keep on flipping your email and looking at the laptop. Really engage with that person, look them eye to eye, and give them that time that they need. This is key for developing relationships. Because even if you're a great leader, first of all, for you, you will understand things much better when you connect with people and when you're close to them. And when you're close to them, they would be revealing to you much more than they would reveal to someone who they are scared of or they're afraid of. Because, when you trust someone, you will reveal more, you will share more. So they would have better, business intelligence, if you want, when they are connected with people. So it is helping the business, it is helping the leader per se, and at the same time, it's making that person feel that I'm cared for. This person cares about me. He's giving me time and he's listening to me. He's listening to my ideas, to my concerns. But of course, during these, the leader has to be authentic. I don't need to do it because, it's on my agenda. It needs to be authentic. It needs to be from the heart. It needs to be that I am really doing it because I care. If it's not that, the person can feel it. And then the connection doesn't happen. It needs to be authentic.
I mean, it could almost be more destructive, right? Because it just
Yeah,
seems like you're just giving useless platitudes.
exactly. And this is what happens many times. We sit with someone, but we're like thinking of something else at the same time. The person is giving me, some concerns or challenges that they are having, and I'm like, somewhere else, thinking of something else, and I reject or I defend, because the person is giving me some input that I don't want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to get into it. I want them to do this, to do it this way. So the only thing I do is I take whatever input there is and I start defending. Okay. And that's the worst thing that could happen because that doesn't create empathy. That makes the person feel more and more like an alien with respect to you. So they will be alienated even more and more. So you really need to commit to that. If I'm going to give you half an hour, I can't give you more, it's fine. But let this half an hour be fully for you and me concentrated on you and me concentrated on understanding why are you saying this? Not judging and pushing away whatever you give me because I feel like my ideas are the best. That's not about empathy.
For those who didn't catch at the beginning, I'm talking to Nadine Zainoun, and you can find her at nadinezainoun.com, NADINEZEINOUN. And she's an executive leadership coach. And we are knee deep in a conversation about emotional intelligence, empathy, and caring for your team. So let's talk in the last segment of our show here, and we still have several minutes, but the people, your clients that you work with. So
Mhm.
I'm a leader, a boss, or an owner of a company, and I'm thinking that I could maybe use somebody like you, Nadine.
Mhm.
What is generally a starting space that you find your clients to be in when they come to you? Or I would say, what would be a space that they would be in that you would not be surprised to find them in when they're calling you?
Um, they're usually overwhelmed. That's the first thing. So they feel overwhelmed. They feel frustrated because they're trying many things with their team and it's not happening and they're not really clicking. So frustration and overwhelm is a common thing. And why is it overwhelmed? Because when I find like my team is not really doing the things I expect them to do, I start doing things for them. So I stop delegating and I start taking everything on myself. And that starts making me overwhelmed and I get burnt out. And at the same time, I'm frustrated because, I want to give them these things, and I want them to work and I want them to be at this level. And I feel like they're really, really way off what I expect. So that's why this causes a lot of frustration for me. And at the same time, because of this frustration, usually they tend to take it out on the people. And when they
Uh,
take it out on the people, they start feeling guilty because, no matter how cold and, the leader sometimes looks too cold and as if, they're like a wall and nothing can, enter them inside. They're just humans. They're like every one of us. They have feelings, they have their own insecurities. And so deep down inside, they're like children and like babies. And, they're so innocent and nice. But it's just that this image that they have built around them is not really the best image for their success as leaders. And this is where that's another frustration that they have because they feel misjudged. They feel that people are not seeing who they are. They're just, judging them based on the certain behaviors that they've done, and they don't really know that they really care. So that's how usually they are in, and that's we start working on that, on creating that image, but first aligning them with who they want to be before we create the image. So who do they want to be as leaders? And are they really showing up like the image they want to be? And we start working on that, and little by little things develop.
do you ever notice that people who are trying to take this on have deep-seated insecurity about their own actual abilities and they worry about communicating with their teams more, could reveal that, and so they are worried about being outed as being incompetent themselves?
Yeah, of course. That's for sure. Because I don't know if you've heard of, saboteurs. Have you ever heard of saboteurs or inner critics?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that voice inside us, inside our head that always, attacks us and makes us feel like we're not good enough.
Oh, you mean that voice
Guess
right
what?
now that's telling me that I don't have an inner voice, and what are you talking about, Nadine?
Exactly.
That voice?
No, no, I don't have one. Yeah, me too. I don't have one, Russ. I have many, actually, not just one. So yeah, I mean, every human being has those saboteurs, and even a CEO, they have saboteurs. And actually, because they are in high positions, there's a lot of expectations from them. And this puts a lot of pressure on them. And they do fall into those insecurities. They're humans at the end. And that's why, when they get coached, it's important to get rid of these or know how to address these insecurities in the best way possible.
I mean, it seems like it could be, I don't know if it's step one, but a pretty early thing, right? Because if that's
Yeah.
going to be in the way, then that's going to stop them from taking on everything else, right? If they're always trying to stay guarded.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because, and that's why, we people think that it's only business stuff. You asked me this last time. People think that we only work on business objectives, but sometimes, as you just mentioned now, if there's a personal thing where if I'm not comfortable with who I am and I'm not sure of what I'm doing, I mean, that would hinder any business decision. So we need to address that before we go to anything else. Yes, absolutely.
Have you ever had clients that come to you because they know that they have to go through like a restructuring at their company or whatever, and they're pretty much going to be bringing in, short-term big disruption and, having to fire people and things like that, and they are, really concerned about doing that?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I had many clients like that in Lebanon, like maybe 2 years ago when we had the major financial crisis and all the things on top of COVID. So a lot of restructuring was happening in companies, and those companies who really care about their people, and this shows me that they cared. They even, they wanted to come up with a plan where they can do this in the, most humane way possible.
Hmm.
And I really enjoyed working on those projects because it's nice to see when people really care about their people. Even when you're firing them, you care about what the consequence is and who they are as a human and what you're doing. So they're aware of all this. And yet, the business, because of the business problems they were facing, they had no choice but to do that. So yeah, I have worked with that, with in such situations.
Have you ever discovered, though, that maybe they did have a choice, and instead of wiping out a bunch of people, you generated a new path with them?
Yes, and there are certain situations where we have done that, where they thought that, these people, there's no way we're going to get out of anything. We're stuck and we have to let go of people. And but this was more of a team coaching. It wasn't individual coaching, but as a team, they discovered that, we may have other ways. So when they were able to use their creativity and their innovation, they did come up with ways where they created a new opportunity out of this chaos that we were in. And this new opportunity allowed them to maybe restructure, but not fire people.
Before we go, one final question for you here. I read an article several years back
Mhm.
that Netflix, it came out that the employees from high and low would have meetings every so often where the meeting was basically every person would have to say in front of a group, I should still have my job because. Would you, right now, I heard that and that just sounded pretty Hunger Gamey to me. Um, would you say that things like that can actually keep people on point, or do those things are those pretty risky for just creating breakdowns in teamwork and leadership?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of it because I never heard that way of doing it, and that's very interesting. So I would say, like um, as a first look at it, it's stressful on the employee.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure, as a first look. I don't know what the thinking was behind it. Maybe if I get to really understand how they were thinking and why they came up with this solution, maybe they have a point somewhere, but it can be tweaked a bit. But as a first look, uh, it made me feel pressured. So I guess the employee would feel a lot of pressure if they would have to find, every week they have to say, or they have to continuously justify why they exist in the company. That's scary.
So Nadine, let's leave it there. But maybe that could be something, if we have a chance to speak again, worth talking about on how to strike that balance between being caring while still holding people to account for the betterment of the company and the team. I think that's a whole conversation in and of itself, as well as anything else that you bring to the table. Nadine Zainoun, thank you so much again. You can find her executive leadership coaching at nadinezainoun.com, NADINEZEINOUN. Nadine, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Ross. Have a good week.
And to all the rest of you, enjoy your week as well. I am Ross Morasso. Until next time. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.